Okay, so hello everyone. I'm Kenny, and would you like to introduce yourself and say a little
Yes.
bit about how we know each other?
I'm Kait, or Caitlin. I go by both now, but my ensemble's been lovely enough to help me to commit to Kait. We know each other through FSU Asolo Conservatory. We're in the class of 2021, slowly approaching our graduation that is slowly being prolonged because of COVID. We've known each other for 3 years now. I'm from Michigan, moved to Sarasota about 2.5 years ago. And now we're in Tallahassee for our last semester, which was a little bit of a curveball. We found out about 3 months ago that due to COVID, because theater opportunities are much more limited, we're going to be working with some of the film students here. So
So this is just like very relaxed. The purpose of this is just to like learn your story, and the things that make you who you are, so. For you, could you kind of talk a little bit about how your childhood was? What was your childhood like?
It was a recreation of the Von Trapp family in a lot of ways. My dad was not an overzealous captain by any means, and they did not run a tight ship. But I have 5 sisters and 1 brother, so big family. I'm number 3, which means I was a mother to a lot of the kids. I have a wonderful mom who is the dream of moms, but naturally when you have that big of a family, your parents need help. The trick is parents always say that it's easier after 3 kids, but the reason it's easier is because you have the other kids to help. So it's easier on the parents, but it means that the kids are going to do some parenting
So
too.
isn't it usually like the oldest kid is the one who like helps out, or like for you, or the other two like?
I mean, the thing is, so the oldest kid is the guinea pig child. So I'm very glad that I was not the oldest, because the reality is certain rules were loosened up by the time it got to me, and your parents have a little bit more of an idea of what's going on. There definitely aren't as many pictures of me as there were my oldest sister. I mean, anytime there's a first child, there's going to be a million more pictures, but when you're the 3rd child, you're there for all 4 of the younger kids being born. So yes, the sibling right underneath me, I didn't help as much, but my youngest 3 siblings especially, you end up helping a lot around the house, which is a good thing. You learn a lot of responsibility. I think it's a lot of the ways that I learned leadership skills. It's a lot of the ways that I learned how to speak up for myself. Every family has their good and bad things. I think that there's a lot of beautiful things being in a big family, and I'm grateful for it.
Yeah. Could you talk about one of your favorite memories of growing up with the big family?
Man, I mean, there's no doubt, my life in the performing arts, it was because of my family environment that I had. I grew up doing dance, and me and my older sister, we stayed in it. Most of my siblings, by the time they were 7 or 8, decided it wasn't for them. But by the time my older 2 sisters were in high school, they were doing musicals. So it was we were known as the Weichel clan and the Weichel dynasty, because every time one kid graduated, another kid was coming into the high school. So that was always really fun. And I remember there was one time in particular, I must have been in, I think, 3rd or 4th grade. Because it was when the first High School Musical movie came out, and my dad was having a business dinner. He had a couple or 2 couples over for dinner, and decided that he wanted us kids to put on a show for them.
Does sound like the Von Trapps.
Yeah. So basically, we ended up turning on Status Quo from High School Musical, and blasted it in the living room while we did a full-on lip sync. We recreated the set. We had tables set up, 3 different tables in the room, and all from our memory from watching the movie a million times, basically recreated it. And I was so jealous of my oldest sister because she got to play Sharpay. I was the hip hop girl. But yeah, it's those little moments where all of the sibling stuff just kind of goes away, and we all just completely lost ourselves in the imagination of it. In that moment for those 3 minutes, we were in High School Musical. The stakes are so high, and
so
the parents all gonna laugh out of it.
Getting into high school and stuff, what was your high school experience like? how did you feel in terms of like the hierarchy of, because we talk a lot about education on the channel and like bullying and also like where people feel like they are in the high school landscape. Like where do you think you fit in high school?
I was a butterfly in high school. I mean, I was definitely a theater kid. Like people knew I was in theater. They knew that that was my thing. I'd say in terms of like the school hierarchy, I actually experienced the most of that in elementary school. Most people get that, you know, middle school, high school. I'd say my elementary school was the rockiest. I also, as a kid, was very mature for my age because of being in a big family. I grew up with my older siblings. So I was very strong-minded and I wanted to be a leader. I had a lot of like body image issues that started from a very young age. I was in dance, so as much as dance teaches you so many wonderful things, something I've really discovered lately is also just like how much it instills in you from a young age. The responsibility is wonderful, the dedication is wonderful, you develop passion. It's great in terms of being able to go and focus on something and to get out of the house and be involved. But also you're dancing in front of a mirror. And like as somebody who never was that Balanchine body build of the dream ballerina, I was always in this constant fight because that was like my first love, but there was also such a huge part of me that knew from a very base level that I could never actually do what I loved because of the shape of my body. You know, and I wasn't an extremely overweight child, but I definitely had weight issues that my weight would just fluctuate very easily. And it didn't have to do with my eating habits. I was extremely active. It was just the way I was built. And I think along with that came just like a lot of self-conscious issues. I constantly felt like the fat kid in the group when I was in elementary school. Middle school was I had a group of just lovely friends that were just very creative and goofy. And we got along great and we got along with everybody. And then by high school, I'd say that I was in that same kind of constant fight as like from when I was in elementary school because I was still in the performing arts. But I also had a group of friends that had my back to the end of the world once I got into high school. And I had a lot of leadership positions. I mean, I was still dancing full time. I was the dance captain for the varsity choir. Varsity choir, if you didn't know that was a thing, it's a thing. Basically, like show choir, we weren't competitive or anything by any means. It was a small town. But as well as that, I also did the shows. So typically I was also doing the musical and the plays. So I would run a schedule from 6 a.m. until 10 p.m. almost every night by the time I was in high school, which was a lot. But to me, I loved everything that I was doing. Like to me, it was I got through the school day in order to get to play rehearsal or in order to get to dance because that's where I wanted to be. I had very good grades. Grades were never an issue. I was the kind of person that I was a natural teacher. People would come to me if they wanted help with math questions, and I'd try my best to word it to them because my brain sorts it differently than most people. But yeah, I mean, I never felt like I fit in the most with the performing arts students, but I felt like I got along with anybody in high school. Like we had a pretty even-keeled class. Yeah, it's interesting.
So you already kind of touched on what made you want to be an actor, but were there any other things when you were younger that were kind of like in competition with acting or performing arts?
You know, acting didn't come into the picture until high school. You know, I did a little bit in middle school. My lifelong dream was always to be a Disney princess, and I got to play Belle in my 8th grade production. And that was like the world to me. But my older sisters had gotten into the plays at that point, because before that it was really mostly dance. And my oldest sister, when she was in 8th grade, she did a musical, and that was Into the Woods. So that was kind of the first exposure that I had to a live show. And Into the Woods to this day is one of my favorite musicals. I think it's so beautiful. So I think a lot of it was just seeing my older sisters, and naturally we look up to our older siblings. In dance, you know, I was never the best turner, I was never the best leaper. The one thing that I could really excel at was emoting and telling a story. And that was something that a lot of teachers would, you know, kind of call me out for in a way, where that was something that I did feel really confident with, and same with in choir. And then for me, I mean, I ended up going into music theater because of the acting was there, but really primarily because of the singing and dancing. That was my first love. And then when I got into my second semester of junior year of college, I worked with one of my professors, Kait, and she directed this production of Women of Lockerbie. And it had to do with the Pan Am flight that went down way back in, I'm going to get the date wrong because it's been a minute, I want to say 87 or maybe 97. I'll have to fact check that.
Okay.
Because I feel bad that I don't know it. But it's Pan Am,
okay.
Flight Pan Am 103 that went down over Lockerbie in Scotland. And it's basically this entire production. It's written in the form of a Greek tragedy by Deborah Brevoort, but it's written with contemporary language. And it's based on a true story of these women in Lockerbie, Scotland, that after this flight went down, years after, there's parents who are coming back to basically kind of mourn the loss of these people, because a lot of people were killed. I think the total number was 127, including the people the flight actually landed on when it went down. And so basically these women, all they want to do is to be able to wash the clothes from the incident, to be able to send them home to the loved ones, because the way that the flight went, there weren't bodies to bury. So the whole thing was that these people didn't have your normal way of placing their grief. They didn't have a burial. They didn't have a cremation. So they just wanted to be able to wash the clothes from the scene to be able to send them home to the families. But because of all of the investigations and because there were all these conspiracies and the U.S. government basically wouldn't let them near it. After all this time. So the play is kind of built around these women trying to just get the clothes. It's that simple of an objective, but the depth that comes in, because there's a couple who lost their son on the flight. Their son was going on a study abroad trip and the flight went down over Lockerbie. Kind of meets these women in Scotland and they're trying to help them, and my favorite quote from it is, when evil comes into this world, it's the job of the witness to turn it to good. And we're working on that production. She brought in a lot of components of what her graduate training was when she was in graduate school. A lot of ensemble building. It was very much a piece about working together, especially with the Greek chorus aspect. The four Scottish women were like the Greek chorus within that production. And just the connection with the audience in the room every time we did the show. Hearing feedback after the fact and the way that people were affected and the depth in which people were able to experience that story in a little black box theater. It was not a huge theater. It was a black box theater, maybe 3 times the size of my apartment. That the show was in 3/4, where you're in the middle, like 5 feet away from the people, not COVID friendly. But just... It was just unbelievable. One of those pieces where it didn't have all the sparkle and big production that I had fallen in love with music theater. It was really this small production with 6 people. The set was made from dyed clothing to mirror the clothing that came from the flight being crashed.
So what was it about that kind of like sparked you? Was it the ensemble building? Was it putting the story to life? Was like...
I think I began to understand the power of the actor, and the importance of the actor. That was the first time that I really realized, because and I come from a very, very strong faith, and that's something that I think does become a struggle within the life of an actor, is a lot of times you ride this line because a lot of people feel that you can't be a person of faith and that you can't believe in God if you're following this career, because there's so many misjudgments about this field. And that was the first time that it felt like the work that I am doing here is serving people. It's not serving myself. It's not serving my own... yes, I'll admit I felt great after doing the production. It's wonderful to get affirmation because we're in a field where we're constantly being, picked apart and told to do different things. And but the fact that, having somebody who had lost somebody come to the show, and to be able to walk away from that production having experienced, whether they teared up during the show, or whether there were some people who actually said that, we knew someone who is related to somebody who died in that flight, and they were able to go and they were able to take away a piece from that. And to be able to kind of open up compassion within the room. And really the relationship with the audience felt tangible every time. It didn't feel like us and the audience. It just, that entire room, the energy and the beauty of humanity in the worst of situations, and like the power of something so small as being able to wash these clothes in the river, to be able to get that closure and have something that small be that powerful, and then to be singing this beautiful Scottish song McCrummen at the end that's like a lullaby as everyone's finally washing the clothes, and to be able to accomplish that journey and see that small piece, that small moment of love and nothing but love, how much closure and how much that can redirect the change in someone's life. And I do believe that theater does have the power to change lives, even on the small scheme, even if it means that it just changes a little bit of perspective. There's so much beauty to be shared, and in a world where there is so much frustration, and anger comes from passion. Anger has its place. People have the right to be angry, but if everything is done with anger and from frustration, a lot of the time the listening is a lot harder. It's a lot harder to listen through anger. And so we get so much, our country is so divided right now, and like we need more people who are fighting for that position, to have people to listen wherever they stand on that spectrum, is just making sure that people are being heard and that open-mindedness is being taken into account. And I guess that I felt like, like in high school, being a little butterfly hopping around between social groups and everything, like I've always been a little bit of a mediator. I was an RA in undergrad, and being able to use that gift within the arts and then be able to see those aspects, my heart still lies with the productions that have a lot of heart. Like my dream show would be Come From Away. Yeah.
Yeah, all these shows with the planes.
I know. Well, but honestly, when I saw that show, I had just found out that I got into the FSU Oslo program, and it was my first time seeing a Broadway show that was on my own, where I wasn't with somebody else, where I was experiencing the piece, sitting in the audience, not with friends, not with family. And I remember watching that production and saying, what they are doing is what I want to be doing. What they are bringing to this room, and the beauty of the art that is happening in this space, the amount of love that is in this room by the end of this production, I want to be a part of that, and I'm not at their level yet. I need to go to grad school. And I remember having that moment of like, if I want to do this, I need to go. Because, and this was wrapping up my BFA of, 4 years of very intensive training. That's a very good program, but I'm like, my acting has not been explored enough. I have not, I haven't been digging deep enough into what's actually there.
Well, I would love to kind of follow that line of thought. So like as now you've gone through grad school, what is necessary, you think, to get to that level? Like that digging, that deep digging, like could you talk a little bit about that? Like, I mean, like we both know, we know, but like people out there have no idea what acting grad school is like.
I know.
So like, could you talk a little bit about what that is, that deep digging is?
Yeah, I mean, like some of my family, they like to joke around. It's like, well, did you roll around on the floor today? And I'm like, well, we did. I'm like, that's not the point.
We did, and 15,000 other things happened.
Yes, yeah, and I mean, so much of it is meeting yourself where you're at, wherever you're at, meeting your past self, being able to find. I was actually listening to a podcast on it this morning where I'm like, holy cow, this is exactly what we do in grad school. So much of it is meeting ourselves, even what we perceive to be the ugliest part of ourselves, whether it's 5-year-old Caitlin who just wants to fit in but feels like she's too fat to be able to be one of the cool girls, and is compensating for that in other ways, or whether it's the high schooler that just wanted to be loved and was in a bad relationship. It's finding those moments and those part of ourselves where maybe we weren't the most proud of those moments, but being able to find compassion for that. And then trying to see why is it that we did that, and then how has that affected our lives, and then how can we choose to use that when we need to, but also are we willing to let go of that in order to cross new bridges? I think acting and exploring art is an act of bravery. I'm working on Julia Cameron. I know you love it.
Yes,
The Artist's Way.
Yes.
I'm in week 2 right now, so very early in the process. But so much that she talks about is the fact that our creativity comes from a divine source. And our ability to use that creativity and share that creativity with the world is serving that calling. You know, and I think that wrapping up the last 3 years of digging into all these different levels and kind of like re-coming back to that point of, I don't know if re-coming is even a word, oh well. But like...
We get you. We understand. Yeah.
Yeah, and just to come back to reading those words and having like... feeling like within school settings, feeling like I have to not bury my faith, I bring my faith with me wherever I am, but feeling like it kind of has to be set aside depending on, you know, what teacher you're working with or what teacher's view it is. When in reality, I don't need to hide any of that. That's all part of me.
Right.
I don't need to hide it, but it's a matter of me feeling like, oh, will I fit in or will I, you know, that's part of, you know, doubt sneaking in. But just... I don't know. I mean, to actually answer your question, because I totally went on.
No, that's okay. That's okay. No, yeah.
I'm like running through the labyrinth right now and taking turns. So many twists and turns these last 3 years. But I think really a lot of grad school at the end of the day is coming to accept who you are, learning who you are, and recognizing that we may accept who we are, but we might not even know who we are to begin with. And sometimes that question's never answered. You know, who I am one day may not be who I am tomorrow. I'm not saying that I have multi-personalities, but... No.
Yeah,
I mean, I'm a Gemini, so...
That self is in process, right?
Yeah.
And that, you know, like one thing can pop up in your life that triggers an interest that you didn't even know that you had. I don't know if that's what it was like with guitar, but like, you know, so like things pop up and you change and you evolve, and it's healthy to continue to know yourself and to learn the things that interest you.
Yeah, and finding comfort in that discomfort, I think is one of the biggest things. Because in undergrad, you're learning technique. In graduate school, it's getting past the technique and willing to push yourself further. And not in an unhealthy way, in a supported environment with people who will embrace you, whoever and however you are in that day, and being able to get out of your own way. Because we need technique to know how to project to the back of the room. We need technique to be able to learn lines. We need technique to know how to have etiquette in the rehearsal space. But at the end of the day, nobody wants to see a robot on the stage. You know, they want to see people. They want to see souls. They want to see people who are struggling with the questions, people who are struggling with grief. So I think that grad school kind of just helps us find that little spark in us that was in us, you know, before we were put down as a child, or before, I should say, in some cases, before we put ourselves down. I think in a lot of ways that's more of my own doing growing up, and pressures that I put on myself that didn't come from other people, and learning to kind of just embrace who we are and hit the ground running.
Well said. Well said. Okay. So now we've come to now, you know, like, and so for you, what have been some difficult lessons that you've learned throughout your life, and how have you processed those, and what advice could you give to people who may have gone through, or may be going through those lessons now?
Yeah. I mean, there's been so many, and so many that I'm still working through, because like what you were talking about, I think everything's in process. Every time we think like, oh, I've accomplished that, you know, even something as simple as like, just personally, I think that a lot of people can relate on the body image issue. I think a lot of people relate with that. Learning, you know, our movement class was detrimental to me being able to learn to love my body and recognize my body as a part of me, rather than it's me and my body. It's like, I am my body. And my body understands, it knows things, you know. Sometimes I'm thinking that I need to overcorrect 5 billion different things to get my body where it needs to be, when at the end of the day, it might just be, I need more sleep, you know. And so I know there was a period of time in grad school where I was waking up at 5 a.m. every day and not going to bed until 11:30 p.m. at night, and just running myself into the ground, and like COVID hit, and I started getting 8 to 10 hours of sleep, and I kid you not, like suddenly so much of just the extra stress weight that I was holding just kind of like fell off my body in like a couple of weeks. And probably not to the extent that a lot of other people would notice or anything like that, but just where all of a sudden I'm like, I have been fighting and fighting and fighting my body to try to make this happen. And like the second I actually like let go and like slowed down, it just happened.
That's
and it's like
crazy.
And that's the thing, is so many people like they like, because and I feel bad bringing up, you know, the self-image thing, but also like just the reality of our world that we live in as artists is it's something that gets thrown in our face all the time, you know, and some people are much better at letting go of that. And when you can let go of that, you can be a lot freer. But growing up in front of a mirror from the time that I was 3, you know, and then going into a BFA program where, you know, you are taught that you're more castable if you're skinnier. You will get more work if you are more in shape. And in a lot of ways, sometimes that's true. Unfortunately, I think the performing world has gotten a lot better about that. But there's so many times that like everybody instantly goes to, I need to be on a diet and I need to be obsessively working out. And we start having that kind of like OCD approach in the way that we manage things. I'm very thankful that I never had an eating disorder to the extent of, I definitely had disordered eating, I should say. For me, it would be more of along the lines of like an orthorexia, kind of falling into that place of the over managing myself, you know, obsessively counting calories, obsessively making sure I burned this many calories in a day. And I did that for a while. And then it took doing that, and then it took not doing that, and then you get the yo-yo effect. And then I like can genuinely say that it has like taken 10 years to get to the point now where I am, where I can have balance. And I love working out. Like, it's a part of my self-health in terms of care for myself. I love feeling empowered when I go to work out, but I do workouts that I enjoy. I'm not forcing myself to go do something because I think it's going to make me skinnier. I'm not sacrificing sleep anymore. I am now prioritizing sleep. And I will eat pizza at least once a week. Sometimes it's a cauliflower crust pizza, sometimes it's regular pizza, you know, and I eat chocolate every day, and I do not complain about drinking wine. But just finding those things and, you know, learning that like life is just too short to be suffering through. And I've never felt that I was suffering, but I'm also, one of my greatest gifts is making the best out of any given situation. And sometimes I actually have to open my eyes to what the situation is. Because if I'm putting myself in an unhealthy place, and if I'm putting myself into constant, like, the way that I heard it put, talking to or listening to something earlier today, is this idea of conditional love for myself. That like, I love myself if I'm feeling this way. I love myself if I did this work today. I love myself if I did this. But like learning that you need to have self-love wherever you are at, wherever you are at on any given day, even if that means that you're feeling hot and sweaty and sweat is pouring down your back because you're in a movement class and your teacher is yelling at you to express. Like loving even that part, because like because so much power lies in that vulnerability. And I think that that's one of like just the biggest things that I've learned is that like it's okay to not be perfect. It's okay to be quirky. It's okay to not be the pretty ingenue, you know, that I always dreamed of being as a kid, you know, the ballerina that I always dreamed of being as a kid. Like, it's okay to recognize that, like, those are all parts of me. Dance will always be a part of my identity. That's something I'm confronting this past week, especially. Like, that really was, like, a first love for me. And I think for a really long time I had shut that out because it felt like a lost dream. But learning that life can take so many different turns, and just because we build up those walls for ourselves doesn't mean that those walls can't be torn down. And I think that was talking about, you know, maybe 10 different lessons, but that's all what I'm still in process with right now.
Well, and that's also how you think.
Yeah.
Too, you know?
Yeah.
Like, there isn't just one. There are a lot of different things that add up to you, or to self-betterment. You know, like that is a part of your thinking process, I think, and your language reflects that. You know.
Yeah, it's like you've heard me think out loud for a while or something.
Well, so there's another one here. Where are you in your journey right now? What is the thing that's on your mind right now?
I mean, so many things on my mind right now. We're at a turning point. We're at a fork in the road. Just in the fact that, we're coming towards graduation. I've been in school for 7 years for theater because I went straight from undergrad. I had about a semester off, got to do $1 Million Quartet after that, which is one of my favorite projects. It was just a beautiful, fun project, and a great cast that I got to work with. But then, going into 3 years, and these 3 years have just been so wonderful, wherever it ends up taking me, and I feel really confident about that, just in the fact that the person that I've grown to be because of the last 3 years, the challenges that I face, and then the amount of growth that's going to continue to happen over the next few years is really important. But I have to figure out, right now it's more so, what's the next step? Like, are we moving to New York? Am I going to go to Chicago? Am I going to go back home? I know I'll be going back home just because family is so important to me. So I'm going to spend at least a couple months just to catch a breather after this year is wrapping up, and kind of figure out the next step. I have some really important loved ones in my life back in Michigan, where long distance is hard. It's doable. I've learned a lot about how to do long distance and how to communicate. But I think that's really where I'm at right now, is trying to let go of that worry, let go of that anxiety, and the constant brain cloud of wondering what's happening 5 months from now, and make the most of what I have today. I love checklists. They don't always get done. But I love being able to look at a day and say okay, what would be awesome if I can get this accomplished today? And then also having forgiveness of if I didn't get to it, it's okay. I'll get to it tomorrow. But really, genuinely, we spent the last 3 years working on how to be present in scene work. And so I think I'm just trying to learn how to let go of the anxieties of planning and how to just be kind of present in the right now. And this exact moment,
In life.
Yeah. And with this exact person, and, recognizing that we can't always have plans go exactly our way. And part of, one of the beautiful things of growing over the last 3 years is relationships that grow out of that. But that the importance within those relationships to be able to let go of your own plans, because when there's another person in the mix, those plans are going to shift. And being okay with not always being in control, and learning to love that. Yeah.
That's hard. It's hard. Yeah, right? The human instinct to want to control, to have perfect control over what we do.
Yeah. But when you find the right people, it's like a breath of fresh air to be able to let go.
Last question. What is advice that you'd give yourself 5 years ago?
5 years ago. Okay. Which Caitlin was that?
Or some advice that you'd give
5 years ago.
How about just some advice you'd give your former self?
Yeah. Well, no, I actually think it's really interesting to think, okay, where was I 5 years ago right now? That would have been, 3 years ago would have been senior year, junior year, sophomore year of undergrad. Oh,
16.
Yeah. I would have told myself to slow down. Just slow down. 5 years ago, that was really when I was kind of probably at the peak of kind of my disordered habits, in terms of obsessiveness, and I had a lot of joy then too. I think there are things that I could learn from myself back then today as well.
What do you think that what do you think your former self would give to you, advice would give to you?
That it's okay to be joyful. It's okay to... we're constantly in the ebb and flow of life. We're constantly in the push and pull and learning new things. And so much of the last few years was me learning how to let the joy go, in order to let other things come up, getting rid of the habitual smile, and I think it's easy to also fall into this idea that part of me isn't good, but because over time you're being told over and over and over, let the smile go. And yes, it was important to meet myself in those other parts of myself. But that little 4 and 5 year old Caitlin who would run around the living room and throw herself onto the floor and strike a ridiculous pose and, do cartwheels and roll around and do somersaults just because I loved moving and I loved being with people and in the room with people and making people smile, and not even making people smile, but sharing smiles with people.
Yeah.
That is such a huge part of who I am.
What an important shift in language that is, too.
Yeah.
You know, sharing smiles with people.
Yeah. Like I love making bad jokes. That's a part of who I am. And that came up the other day. It came up the other day, and somebody's just like, "Oh, it's just so bad." I'm like, "But you smiled."
Yeah, exactly.
I didn't make you smile, and you might have not laughed, but I can laugh at myself. I can laugh at myself, but as long as we're smiling, we're good. And like sharing those moments, like that's important to me. And I think 5 years ago, I was all about the smiles all the time. So I think that that's something that I could take a little bit more of. But I would also tell myself 5 years ago to like
be honest,
take a break,
yeah,
let it go, and it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, it's okay to not be okay.
Yeah, yes, it's okay to not be okay, and slow down and sleep. Get sleep. Your body needs sleep. You think it doesn't. Some people say you'll sleep when you're dead. You'll be more alive if you get your sleep now.
Stupid.
No, but like so many people make that excuse, and like truly, like you can live so much more out of life if you actually get the rest that you need, and for some people that might not be sleep. There are other ways to rest, but like take rest where you can get it, and don't feel guilty in rest, because I feel so guilty sometimes when I just like take a day, and in fact it's really hard for me to actually just take a day to rest. So
a whole day to rest seems like a lot of time.
Yeah, and I have a hard time doing it.
Yeah.
And frankly, to be honest, I don't know that I could tell you the last time that I literally took an entire day to just rest, and not get something off of a checklist or to-do list. But I think that there are ways to find rest within every day, whether that's taking your time for your morning or making sure you have time to wind down at night. Yeah.
Is there any last thing you'd like to say?
Just don't be afraid to be your fearless self. That's all. I'm gonna leave it at that.
Cool. I'm gonna do a little close up here, just in case I end up doing a thumbnail.
Okay.
To do. And could you just say that one last thing that you just said there?
Yeah. Don't be afraid to be your fearless self.
Thank you, Kate.
Thank you, Kenny.